Hi. So it's the night before finals, and I look like crap. It is. Oh my god! Wait. It's 10:20 p.m. My finals is tomorrow. I just want to do this to. I just want to recap on what I've learned before my finals tomorrow, and I guess I should introduce what is my major. I'm in university. I am studying sociology, and tomorrow I have a big exam on classical theory. Yeah, I'm in my third year, so I don't know what I'm trying to explain to myself or to you, whatever, if it's too theoretical because it's quite heavy. But there are familiar. So the questions that I'm going to answer, I posted on the comments. What is society? Thank you. I hope I'll do well in my finals. Yeah, what is society? What are the central problems of society? Where is society headed, and how will we get there? So basically, I'm going to act like a professor. Obviously, I'm a sociological professor, as you can see. But yeah, there are familiar names. Karl Marx and communism. That's one of the theories that we're learning. So actually, like Karl Marx is quite misunderstood because of how people interpreted communism and implemented into their society. As you can probably think about modern societies right now, who might be a communist, and it has a lot of negative connotations with that. But anyways, inside for that, he did explain other things as well. So for the first question, what is society? There will be comparisons within three main theorists that we learn in sociology, which is Karl Marx, Max Weber, and Emily Durkheim, basically Durkheim. So what is society to Karl Marx? So for Marx, who created the theory of communism, he believed that society is where humans partake in production that is creative, meaningful, and conscious. And that we are basically fundamentally social creatures that wants to conduct production that is considered as a social activity. And each time period has a dominant mode of production. So for us right now in our society, it's capitalism. I think that's pretty obvious. So within each time period, there's capitalism or the dominant mode of production, and it constitutes of the forces of production and the relations of production. So forces of production is the actual tools that you use for producing things like the machinery, and relations of productions are the actors involved during production. So the actors, he talked about the proletariat and the bourgeoisie. So the proletariat would be the working class, basically me, and the bourgeoisie would be the capitalist that owns the means of subsistence, which are basically the elites, the rich people, those people, yeah. And and there are contradictions between the the relations of production and the forces of production. And because of these contradictions, he believed that there can be resolutions to the contradictions, and then eventually a new form of mode of production will be created, which is the formation of communism. That is how he related. he formed the idea of communism. But why communism is quite misunderstood is because his ideas on especially how he wrote it, is very complex. So how we interpret it, how normal people interpret it, could be quite different from what he was trying to promote. Yeah, basically he just didn't want there's a very evident differentials in power between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, and he wanted to eradicate that. He didn't like that. Yeah. And what else can we talk about? So yeah, historical change is coming from the resolutions of the contradictions between the the relations of production and the forces of production. Yeah, and I'll talk about Weber. Weber is also quite interesting because his ideas come from what's his name, Marx. Yeah, so he believed that humans or society is made out of value-oriented actions, and that's what makes us human. And ideas and material realities are what drives things forward. And in contrast to Marx, which was the communist guy, he believed that interests is a subjective interpretation. So the idea of a revolution may not be plausible because not everyone would have the same motivation to get out of their exploitative situation, which was what Marx believed. That's why communism was possible. Possible, yeah, in that sense. So yeah, Marx was like, nah, that's not possible because people have subjective interpretations of their own interests. And so he was a bit more pessimistic in his ideas. And he was more interested in the struggle over domination rather than production, which was what Marx was interested in. He believed that there is something called legitimate domination, which is the belief in the validity of the authority figure. And he believed that an example would be like bureaucracy. This is very difficult to explain out loud, right? I think it's kind of a little bit easier, but like out loud is so hard. How do professors do this? Yeah. So society is ideally society um, would be um, would be driven would embrace substantive rationality, which means that people are doing value-oriented action. So their behavior is not towards because of rules or regulations, but it's mainly because of the fact that it's their own interests, and that there are norms and regulations that not norms, norms, that helps them shape their behavior. And but because of capitalism and the need to find the most efficient means to an end, society transitioned into something called formal rationality, which can be evident in bureaucracies. So bureaucracies would be anything to do with like universities. Universities are a bureaucracy. What else? Your government is sort of a bureaucracy, something like that. So yeah, he believed that we have become more formally rational, and basically we have lost the ability to be human because of how formally rational we are, and that we're not able to do value-oriented actions instead. And so yeah, that's how that's how Max Weber believed what society is all about. Yeah, so bureaucracies embraces this concept of rational legal authority. So rational legal authority is characterized by its impersonality and the fact that the obedience is owed to the office, and is the most stable type of domination. And the bureaucracy is the epitome of the shift from substantive rationality, which is value-oriented action, to formal rationality, which is formed in tandem with the rise of capitalism. And capitalism is in its most modern stages, requires bureaucracy to work. Yeah. So yeah, in contrast, Weber doesn't see that the future would be very bright. He was like, yeah, notions of capitalism is not possible because people are also trapped in something called the iron cage. So we are born into this system of capitalism, and it's very hard for us to leave it because we cannot see the system, and we cannot really think for ourselves that this system might be exploitative in nature, and that this system should be something that we get out of. Therefore, Weber doesn't think things like a revolution is possible because of that. And also the reason that bureaucracy and the type of domination, which is rational legal authority, is so stable and so is required for our society to be organized. Like if we leave from that, our society will be chaotic and it will not work because that we found, how do we explain this? Bureaucracy is the most rational way to organize ourselves and the most efficient ways to organize ourselves. And therefore, it's the most superior form of organization that he believes is very hard to get rid of. Yeah, that's so he's more pessimistic than Karl Marx, who thought of the idea of communism. But yeah, but that does not answer the question of what society that is. The third question is, where is society headed and how will we get there? I think that's a problem with my essay writing. I always go out of topic. But yeah, so Durkheim is my favorite guy, man. He is so easy to understand. So basically, he thinks society is, he was French, so sui generis, I don't know how to say that, basically unique or distinctive, and produces phenomena like norms and obligations. And he instead emphasizes the social dimension of human phenomenon. And he was quite interesting because he studied social facts, because that's what he thought society is made out of, which is social facts. And so he studied suicide, which he believed was a social fact because it's characteristic of it. The first characteristic is that it's external to the individual. By saying that it's external to the individual, it means that even if you're not partaking in this action, it'll still exist out there. So yeah. And then another characteristic is that I do not know, but one sec. Oh my god, my finals tomorrow. No, but it's very. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I knew that. So yes, another effect is that there's a constraining effect of this social fact. I'm not sure how he thought of suicide as a constraining effect. Shapes how you can or can't behave. So there's norms of okay. Suicide as well. I guess the concept of suicide has its own norms and values, and yeah, don't know how that works. But okay, the third function, the third characteristic is, my God, why do I know this? I know this. I'm supposed to be a sociology professor, duh. Oh yes. So it can be studied empirically. So I guess notions like suicide, or there's also other examples like money, currency, or language can be studied empirically, but just studying like like, for example, I think money is quite an easier example to explain. So currency can be studied empirically through the logical rules regarding the measurement of money, the exchange value of the currency itself, and so on and so forth. Yeah. So he was more on the social dimension of human phenomenon. What else? And yeah, so to sum up, he believed that society can be studied scientifically and empirically. And unlike Marx, and similar to Weber, he believed that society wouldn't change through radical change. He instead believed on the notions of reformations. So yeah, he didn't really believe that the concerns of what Marx had with division of labor, the increasing division of labor. He didn't believe that it was such a bad thing. Yeah. And now I want to move on to what are the central problems of society. This question is quite difficult to answer because it's not very clear cut. But okay, so Karl Marx, the communism guy. Okay, yeah. So his definition of being human is to partake in meaningful and creative production. But for Karl Marx, society and the rise of capitalism has hindered us from doing that through two ways. There's something called alienation and exploitation. So for alienation, there are four characteristics of it. There's alienation from the product, and this is to do with the fact that the proletariats or the workers don't own the product that they create, and it also points to the fact that in modern society there's higher division of labor, which is referring to specialization and differentiation in society. Because compared to what we have now, before we had something called feudalism, and that was like the simple life, in the farm, you know what you're doing. We're all doing the same thing. We're just harvesting and then planting new stuff. But now we have a lot of different specializations and different jobs to do. So because of that, you feel more alienated from the product. Yeah. And also there's alienation from the act of production because you have no control over the activity, and it separates the will of the worker, and the act of production is now a means to an end rather than something that is meaningful or creative for the worker or the proletariat. Yeah. The no control over activity is to do with the fact that the capitalists or the bourgeoisie is the one that's in control. Yeah. And then there's also the third thing, which is alienation from fellow human beings. So this is in regards to the fact that right now that between the workers it's more competitive, it's antagonistic, and there's no sense of community in comparison to the previous mode of production, which was feudalism. Yeah. And social relations in between the workers and other fellow human beings is dominated by economic exchange, which is obvious because that is what capitalists are trying to aim for, which is money and profit. Yeah. And then the last characteristic, the fourth one, is alienation from species being, and is the combination of the previous three characteristics, and it's just basically trying to point out that in the end, all these alienate this the process of production eventually just dehumanizes us because we're not able to partake in meaningful and creative production. That is what Marx says. And then he also brings up the idea of exploitation. So exploitation, I think, is quite it's a known concept. For Marx, he believed that the capitalists have monopoly over the means of subsistence, and this is why workers or the proletariats are forced to work for the capitalists, because otherwise they will be struggling and they won't survive in that way. So that's why this allows for an exploitative nature, an exploitative dynamic to occur. And he also refers to this concepts of exchange value and use value, in reference to the idea of labor power and labor. So labor power he refers to it as a commodity, and labor is the productive activity of the worker itself. And the exchange value may be the same, but the use value differs, because the surplus value of the product that is made by the labor is appropriated or is monopolized by the capitalists or the bourgeoisie, whereas the wages given for the commodity or for the labor power itself is just enough for subsistence. Yeah, and this is in reference to the fact that capitalists monopolizes the means of subsistence. And this brings us to one of the key contradictions that he talks about, which is the socialized production. I don't know if I'm wording it right. Yes, socialized production, but individualized ownership, which is the idea of appropriation, that the accumulated labor is appropriated by the capitalists. And yeah. I don't know if this is making me more nervous or not for my exam tomorrow. But okay. And then the reserve army. Okay, and then there's this idea of this reserve army of workers, and this is because of the high division of labor, there is an increase in specialization, and then that in turn also increases the skilling, and creates the reserve army of workers, because one worker can do the work of many workers in comparison to how it was before. Capitalism has led to this reserve army of workers, and has maintained that wages will be depressed or lowered still because of the agenda of capitalists. Oh, that's what Marx says. And Marx has a pretty negative view of, not negative view, but he is more hopeful that because of such exploitative nature and the fact that workers are working in tandem with each other during their processes of production, he believes that revolution or communism will prevail, and so he's more hopeful for the future. But then Weber. So the central problems of society to Weber differs, because he looks at the struggle of domination. not the means of production. So basically, he's trying to say that modern society tends to embrace formal rationality because of the because of our emphasis on the efficient means to an end. And what's problematic is that there will be a decrease. There will be a decrease in substance. Huh? My God, my Wi-Fi sucks. Anyways, there'll be a decrease in substantive relations. And because of this lowering in substantive rationality, it renders people less human. And yeah, there is the idea of legitimate domination, which I've mentioned is the belief in the validity of a command of the authority figure, and the idea of rational legal authority, which is a type of domination, developed in tandem with capitalism, as I've mentioned, and it's impersonal and obedience to the office. And so he's trying to point out that there's a more complex conception of power and its reproduction. There'll be the formation of various status groups and that can monopolize resources and establish power from close relations, because to enter the workforce or to enter to be a productive member of society, you need credentials like your degree and so on. So there are barriers to entry to enter the higher status groups. I guess that's why it's problematic to him, because power is quite evident. Yeah, my lecture is a bit confusing. I don't understand this part, but yeah, that's how I understand it. And then the fact that bureaucracy is also formed in tandem with the rise of capitalism could also be problematic, because of how bureaucracy is a top-down approach. So it limits the notions of democracy, which is the ruling in accordance to the will of people. So yeah, and it's problematic because it dulls any considered actions or any value-oriented activity. And Durkheim is also quite interesting, because he believed that there will be a shift from there's this concept of mechanical solidarity and organic solidarity that he brought in. So mechanical solidarity is the idea that people are doing many similar things collectively. So I guess you can go back to the example of like farming. Everyone's doing the same thing collectively, planting the same things and harvesting the same time. So yeah, it's individuals with very similar way of behaving and thinking. And yes. So the problem with the fact that people are thinking the same way or behaving the same way is like the actual structural ties is very weak. So there is the need of repressive laws to fight off any challenges to the collective conscience. So collective conscience, I guess I should define that as well. Collective conscience is that the notions of being a collective is so strong that it overall overwhelms the sense of the individual itself. So the self becomes basically the collective, and that is what collective conscience means. So yeah, in mechanical solidarity, uh, he believed that repressive laws would be in the form of like death penalty or hanging is needed to fight off any challenges to the collective conscience. Um, yeah, and what's interesting is that crime and the punishment of a crime is for the normal people rather for the deviant is because they want to preserve or to make sure that the collective conscience is not being harmed by what being harmed by the act of the crime. So I guess what he's trying to say is that um, something becomes a crime because we condemn it, because of our social reaction to it, that comes from the fact that it offends our deeply shared sentiments or our collective conscience. So it's not a crime because it's a crime. It's a crime because we think it's a crime, which is a very difficult, very um, weird way to think. Very, yeah, okay, but that's Durkheim. And so the punishment is not targeting the criminal. Is actually to do with the social reaction of the crime itself. And the worse the crime is, the worse the punishment is. And because punishment is to do with vengeance rather than anything else, that's why it's called repressive law. And it's quite excessive in its nature. And this excessiveness and this very strong reaction is to do with the fact that the crime is offending our sentiments. And by having such harsh punishment, it can reinforce and defend our collective conscience. Um, and that is how mechanical solidarity is. But anyways, Durkheim believes that we are with modern society we're transitioning to something called organic solidarity. So organic solidarity is characterized by the increasing division of labor, um, and yeah, it's specialized in functions and being societies being interdependent of each other. And I should finish off this live because I need to sleep. But like yeah, they're being more independent with each other, and so yeah, that's the problem with that is that this transitioning from mechanical solidarity to organic solidarity is in rapid transition, which brings up a lot of problems in society, such as forced division of labor and enemy, something called enemy. Enemy is the fact that our norms or shared beliefs aren't clear because because of the incomplete yes, because of the incomplete implementation of division of labor. And the remedy for such a problem is just time to attain equilibrium. Yeah. And forced division of labor is I think quite relevant in today's society is the fact that someone is not satisfied with their job, um, with their specialization, um, and the reason why they're not satisfied is because they're not doing an activity, they're not doing a job that matches their interests or attitudes. Um, so by what he suggests, what Durkheim suggests, is also quite a radical way of thinking, because he suggests that we should adopt this meritocracy. How do I say this? A meritocratic system um, that will come about with the abolishment of inherited wealth. So basically, the idea of when the parents pass away, their wealth won't be inherited to their children when they die. So Durkheim's solution is quite a radical way of thinking. So I guess that's why not a lot of people accept this solution. Oh my God, yeah. And by doing so, it can reduce this inequality in the sense that there's the lack of opportunity for people to um, do the activity that matches their natural tastes. Um, yeah. Huh. Their natural tastes. So the lack of equality for opportunity is quite an interesting thing, because I think that's quite relevant in today's society. What do I want to see? Lack of opportunity. Where did I read that? Am I saying things out of my ass right now? This is a real thing. Okay, anyway, so then yeah, so the problem is that those two things. I think for Karl Marx, the guy who talked about communism, um, an interesting example would be something called Foxconn, which is like a factory that creates the iPad, some parts of the iPad. So the concept of exploitation and alienation would be quite relevant in that case. Um, yeah. I just need to see one thing. Essential problems of society. Oh. Aha. Why am I not reading this? Oh, okay, it's right here. The class conflict, the result of lack of equality of opportunity for entire classes of persons. Okay. Anyways, then that will bring us to the last question, which I should talk about before I. Oh yeah, I need to sleep. Yeah, okay, I need to sleep soon. So where is society headed, and how will we get there? So I think, as I mentioned, Marx believed that a revolution is inevitable, and the revolution would bring the concept of communism as the new mode of production. And the revolution will bring a few things. So the abolishment. Okay, how we get to the stage of revolution is because people are concentrated in space, in a very small space, which is where they work, like such as the factory. And this would then develop class consciousness, and the working class also becomes a revolutionary force, because of another key contradictions that he points out, which is that the um, capitalists' interests versus the capitalist class as a whole contradicts because they keep on undercutting each other, and this would mean that more people from the bourgeoisie class or the capitalists would fall into the working class because of this constant undercutting of each other. And so then the proletariat or the working class increases in its number, and therefore becomes a revolutionary force, um, that allows for a revolution to occur, especially since this proximity of people working together can create a sense of class consciousness, um, where people are conscious or aware of their exploitative surroundings. So revolution will bring the abolishment of many things. So there'll be the abolishment of private property, um, which would then lead to the abolishment of class. And this is because class, the different classes is formed because they can monopolize the means of subsistence, or the idea of private, basically the idea of private property. So by abolishing private property, you would abolish this idea of class. And then he also thinks that we should abolish the idea of division of labor. But he, in his writings, he wasn't very clear on how this would work. So yeah, but there's also in the abolishment of the society as a whole. No, not society. Of, how do we say this? Abolishment of the capitalist society. Is that how you say it? Let me see how my teacher says it. Abolishment of the state. Yeah, capitalist state. And which would then lead to a transitional state where there will be such things such as the dictatorship of the proletariat, which is a socialist transitional state, which he basically calls communism. But the ideas of communism is still quite a complex thing to unpack because of his writing is very heavy and very difficult to understand. So yeah, that's on Karl Marx. And Weber also had a more pessimistic view, as I said before, because he believed that there will be no radical change, such as a revolution. He believed that bureaucracy is crucial because it's an indispensable way of organizing ourselves, because bureaucracy is, well, to Weber, is the technically the most superior way of how society or individuals organize themselves, and therefore we cannot break from it, because if we do, there will be chaos in society. So yeah. And then he believes that modern society is also characterized by the increasing disenchantment. This is in reference to the idea of formal rationality, or the fact that people are just emphasizing on more efficient ways to an end, to create a product. In that sense, yeah. And he also believes that this creation of status groups, and because of this status groups, there are also barriers to entry because of notions of credentials and the fact that there is a hierarchy in society. Um, so he's quite pessimistic because also the notions of communism is quite unattainable because of the concept of iron cage, where people are trapped in this system, and some people might not even be aware of such an exploitative system. Therefore, they aren't even motivated to to make sure such a revolution, such a radical change in society would occur. Yeah. So Weber is quite sad in that way. Durkheim. So the last theorist would be Durkheim, and he is the most optimistic in all of them, in the sense that he doesn't really think there is a problem in society. He just thinks that society needs time to attain an equilibrium, to and that the fact that any problems in society is just temporary, and all you need is time. That's basically his main idea of how the future looks like. So the problems that he referred to was forced division of labor, which is in reference to the fact that more people nowadays aren't satisfied with what they're doing in their jobs and their specialized function in their jobs. So he believed that we just need to abolish, to eradicate, or to remove this idea of inherited wealth, um, so that people have more equal opportunity to um, to do activities that match their needs and interests. But this idea of abolishing inherited wealth is quite a radical idea in itself, because who would want, which parent would want to give away their wealth when they pass away? And then yeah, it's quite a radical idea, because and that's why it's never has never been implemented in society. And I feel like I just repeated myself 200 times about this. Isn't there anything else to this? Um, yeah, but he's quite interesting. Um, and this transition into organic solidarity, or the idea that um, organic solidarity is what human beings um, oh yeah, human beings partaking in division of labor, higher division of labor, so they have their own functions in society. So yeah, he think that that's a very natural thing, but we're just transitioning in a very rapid pace. That's why such problems such as forced division of labor and enemy would occur. An enemy refers to the fact that shared norms and beliefs are not completely enforced yet, are not completely formed because of the rapid pace in society. And yeah, I guess that is it for that. But there are a couple more ideas that's quite interesting for Karl Marx. I guess I feel like I've said everything. Yeah, history is a succession of more. Have I said everything? For Weber, ideas and ideal interests about material realities are the driving force in history. Oh yeah, there was this concept about Protestant ethic, which is the set of ideas about salvation and how to seek towards certain actions. And this formed the spirit of capitalism, because um, this, I think it's a sort of a type of religion, I think, something called Calvinism, and the idea of predestination um, creates such a lot of anxiety on how you should behave because um, people wanted to feel like one of the elects or one of the people that is going to heaven. So people's actions start to be shaped by this anxiety, um, and yeah, and that is how the spirit of capitalism came about because uh, people are motivated to be industrious, to be frugal, to be punctual, and unintendedly created capitalism. But nowadays, capitalism takes on the form of a more secularized format. Secularized meaning that it's um, irrespective or disregarding religion. And so the motivation now is not of religion, but it's to strive for economic success, for profits, rather than the religious commitments. So that's another quite interesting thing by Weber, and that history is shaped by social struggles. Yeah, I guess the last thing that I would like to do in 10 minutes is just to look through my notes in general and see how I did. So yeah. So feudalism, I think that's quite an interesting idea. I never heard of it until I learned this. So it's just very labor intensive um, mode of production, according to what's his name, Marx. And there's also this idea of ideology, which obscures our reality, which obscures the contradictions in um, in society because it's mainly created by the bourgeoisie or the capitalist class who have very limited or partial knowledge of material reality. That's why it benefits this ideologies that is spread around in society benefits mainly the capitalist class or the ruling class. And an ideology, an example of that would be like meritocracy, because meritocracy doesn't talk about the idea of inequality and how that exists in society. So yeah, the idea of ideology would also might hinder such possibilities of revolution. But he also thinks that because there's objective interests, revolution can still occur. Yeah. So this is also the thing that about accumulated labor, which belongs to the capitalist. And this idea of the accumulated labor, uh, so accumulated labor is defined as the transformations of things that occur over time and are also produced socially. And this collective product that it garners, that it creates, is also garnering extra or surplus value that goes only to the capitalist, since the accumulated labor is appropriated by the capitalist. I feel like whatever I'm saying is very quite. I feel like what I'm saying is quite a complex thing because it's written with a lot of theory that I don't know if only I can understand or is quite straightforward. But so Karl Marx then also thinks that there is false consciousness. I think the idea about ideologies and the fact that it obscures reality comes in play in here because we cannot see our own conditions, or at least that's what Marx thinks, that we cannot see our conditions properly because of what is being fed to us by the working class. Sorry, by the capitalist class. That their nature or their working environment might not be as bad as they think it is, but he does argue that the system cannot sustain because people or the working class would realize one day their conditions because of the proximity of how close they work to each other, and the fact that exploitation, the notions of exploitation would increase with time because the capitalist class is competing for money, for profit. So the system can't sustain because one day it's inevitable that a revolution will happen, as I said before, and that communism would take over capitalism, and capitalism would be out of the door. But yeah, this idea of communism is still quite a difficult thing to occur because he didn't take into account of many other things, I feel, and he never really outlined what communism really is, because okay, that's funny, but because he was writing about it, but then he died halfway through writing what really communism is. So he never outlined what it is, but he tried to just say that we need to abolish many things that makes society, makes humans. We need to abolish many different factors that dehumanizes us, which is the idea of private property and the idea of class. Yeah, so he really didn't like that, but yeah, he's quite interesting in that sense. So Weber, he believed that people obey orders because of legitimacy rather than anything else. So commands are oh, my nose is itchy. Commands are followed through because there is legitimate, or there is a belief in the authority, the belief of the validity of the authority. And there's also a belief that there's no acceptable alternative to the ruling. And what's evident now in modern society is one type of domination, which is called rational legal authority, as I've said. And yeah, rational legal authority rose in tandem with capitalism, and capitalism also rose in tandem with the idea of bureaucracy. And this rational legal authority embraces the concept of formal rationalization. So yeah, and bureaucracy is the epitome of shift from substantive to formal rationality. And there's quite a lot of characteristics of a bureaucracy. There's 7. So there's fixed job positions, there's a clear hierarchy, there's management based on written records. Anyways, there's the prerogatives of the jobs are separate from personal life. Management is based on training and expertise and credentials, and jobs demand full working capacity of their holder, and management also follows stable rules that can be learned. And he does believe that we need bureaucracy because it's technically superior to other forms of organization. And he thinks that there is this idea that social leveling exists still, even though so there's still an even playing qualifying field. Yeah. Okay, but I think now I need to sleep. But okay, that's it. Oh, okay. This I'm almost done. Maybe I'll just do this and then I'll go sleep. So Durkheim, he's like, yeah, two things, priority over, he was interested in the priority. He prioritized the social over individual. He stressed on the social dimension of all human phenomenon. And he also believed that society can be studied scientifically and investigated through observation and empirical research, basically. And sociology to Durkheim is the study of social facts, which is independent of the observer, independent of the individual will. And division of labor in society, which is the modern crisis of morality. He implies that there will just be a new kind of morality, a new kind of solidarity that will occur, which is the notions of organic solidarity. And this solidarity can't be observed directly. Instead, it's an empirical manifestation where you need to consider laws that will tell you what kind of solidarity a society has. And this is where you compare repressive and restitutive laws. And yeah, I think I've said everything else. Oh, but there's also the notions of, so organic solidarity it does reduce the element of the collective conscience, except for the notions of cult of the individual, where people are viewed as, or the individual is viewed as sacred, and we should protect people's rights and certain rights to livelihood and bodily autonomy and all that. So yeah, there's still that sense of notions in society, even though we have transitioned into organic solidarity. So yeah, and oh, basically I'm done. Durkheim. So in the future, Durkheim was like, there will still be solidarity, but it's just a different kind of solidarity. There will be high interdependence of each of individuals because of the increase in division of labor or the specialized functions that people do. This is an example, will be like in a factory where people do different parts, where people have different specialized functions, and they need to work together to create the one product, like an iPad. So they're interdependent with each other, and there's also the creation of a sense of obligation to each other. And in an ideal society, there will be individuals that are rewarded according to his contributions into society, which is also another radical idea from Durkheim, because he talks about social contributions to society, and this is quite difficult to implement in modern society because of how we emphasize on economic contributions instead of social contributions. So careers such as a social worker, or careers such as rubbish, people who pick up rubbish and all that, he would think that they would be rewarded much more than, Wall Street people who work in the Wall Street. And yeah, so it's so all of them have quite radical thinking, but they're unique in their own ways, and that's what sucks, because they're so difficult to understand. And I don't know how I'm going to do tomorrow, but it's okay. I should go sleep. Yeah, it's 11:30. Okay, yeah, I have to go sleep. Anyways, bye. Thanks for joining in. That was a very boring live stream because I'm just talking to myself about my exam tomorrow. Anyways, bye.